This is Women Talking Mitzvot, brought to you by Dorocheha and the Stella K. Abraham Migdal Oz Women's Beit Midrash as part of their commitment to bringing women's spiritual worlds into halachic discourse. This podcast series has been graciously sponsored by Sigal and Zach in honor of Women's Talmud Torah, Women's Halacha Study, and in merit of Am Yisrael. We wanted to share with all of you a special live episode that we recorded. The session is called Her Ways Are Pleasant, Drachea Darchei Noam, Living a Life of Torah. In this conversation, we share tips for authentic work on our Avodat Hashem during the month of Elul and throughout the entire life cycle. We recorded this episode live in the Beit Midrash of Migdal Oz at an event in honor of Rabbanit Esti Rosenberg's 60th birthday. Though our conversation was geared toward a younger audience, the core ideas should resonate at different stages of life.
Okay, so great to see all of you. The topic that we're talking about tonight is called Drachea Darchei Noam, like a Torah life throughout life's stages. And in thinking about what we're doing here tonight, which is Bikar celebrating Rabbanit Esti's 60th birthday, but also this Beit Midrash, 28 years of Torah and a high level for women, 28 is Koach. And I think when I think about this Beit Midrash for myself, I think about that it is a place where I draw strength from. Whether it's while we were here or when we come back for Shlichut, for Yom Kippur, for Purim, or really just like on any regular day that women can walk in and pull up a chair and learn Torah with that hum of like the buzz in the background of other women joining you. And when I was thinking about where I wanted to start in talking about this topic, I found myself naturally turning to Rav Amital. Not only because he was the founding Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Har Tzion, along with Rav Lichtenstein, and also of this really helped establish this Beit Midrash with Rabbanit Esti, but also because I know that he's a very meaningful figure to Rabbanit Esti. She quotes him a lot, and I think a lot of it is because of his honest, really direct and authentic view. The same way that like Rabbanit Esti just loves to talk in El Yashar L'Inyan, and like she just shares from a very authentic space. That was also true about Rav Amital, like a real realist in that sense. And the quote that I wanted to start with, which is, by the way, from this amazing book. If you don't have it, it's very shavadigat. It's called the Olam Yehei Adam, and it's drawn from like Torot, different sichot, and different shurim that Rav Amital shared with his talmidim. They organized it by topic. So in a chapter that's called Kasher HaMalachim Botzim Ladin et HaTorah Him Sholim et Beit Din Shamata, like when the angels want to understand the Torah, they look to the humans down below, and it's about the chibor of Torah to the dynamid of life. Like we don't want Torah to be something that's up in the heavens that's just meant for angels. So he talks there about a student that once came to him to ask him, Al hakoshi liot tamid b'lavut b'limud. Like, how do I stay always excited and passionate about my learning? And also in tefillah. Is it Eitzah ani noten? What kind of advice can I give him? And he said, Aniti lo, shani lo eten Eitzah kazot, ki asor shetamid tiyeh b'lavut. So I'm not going to give you any piece of advice about how to always stay passionate, because you shouldn't always be passionate. That's not real life. And he goes on to talk about how in life there's ups and downs, and that we have to kind of be prepared that we're not always going to feel that excitement and we're not always going to feel that passion. He says, sometimes we really, really want to be passionate. We really want to be excited. We really want to be connected. It's not good to always expect that. It's not even good to always feel that. Adam hu lo rahit. A person is not a piece of furniture. Rahit kafisha tama midoto kachiya machar. A piece of furniture, you buy a new couch, it looks this way today, it looks this way tomorrow, but oto matzah. Adam tamidoto kan machar hu yad b'makom acher. But people are dynamic, they're changing, life evolves, and he says, and therefore we have to understand that Torah and tefillah has to be relevant to us also when we're in a situation where we have that ruach and we have that hitlavut, but also kishen hitlavut, but also when we don't feel that kind of passion. And he says so honestly that sometimes we get up and we get up on the wrong side of the bed and things aren't going for us and we don't feel good and we don't feel like we're connecting. And he says to understand that that also is a real part of Avodat Hashem, is something that could give us strength and could keep us going in life. And for me, like, I so appreciate that. And I think, like, as you go through life and you hit those bumps or you hit those moments where you're like less connected, to not be surprised by them, but actually even to say these are moments where I could show myself that this is still meaningful for me, even when I'm not like on fire. And one thing that comes to mind when I think about that is that Judah, my husband, after coming home from his years in yeshiva in Gush, he was once talking to his father with like that smug condescension that yeshiva students often come home with. And he was talking about the people in the community and the balabatim in the shul and saying something, looking down on them. And his father just turned to him very calmly and he said, Judah, sometimes one has to run very hard just to stay in place. And it made a very deep impression on him. I think it's a statement that's full of wisdom, that sometimes we look at ourselves and we're like, we're not moving forward, we're not growing, like nothing's happening. I'm the same way I was. And it's like, actually, you're working so hard just to stay in the place that you are. And as we go through life and, whether it's shivud or army or university or jobs or marriage or kids or whatever, and sometimes you look around and you're like, but where's the chidush and what's different? It's like, actually, I'm running really hard, working really hard to stay connected, even if to myself and others, it doesn't look like I've moved at all. And I think that's something that I've come to appreciate even more, like as life has gotten more complex.
I think that what we kind of envision in this session is to think out loud with you all about ways to like tap into genuinely reflecting on our Avodat Hashem, meaning taking the candor of Rav Amital, who I also didn't know, but as I like read more and more of his sichot, really over the past 2 years, b'zchut this book, which I love. I thought I was going to read it the Shabbat with my kids, and I realized it was like way above that level. Yeah, not a kid's book. I was like, oh, it's short. No, not a kid's book. But I would like sort of went backwards and retraced a lot of his steps. And I feel like a lot of the candor in his Torah I relate to very deeply. I feel like there are roots there that relate to language that I appreciate. And so we kind of wanted to think with you about ways to genuinely reflect whatever stage of life everybody's in, about where we are in our Avodat Hashem. Obviously, this is because it's Elul and it's reflection time. And I think that, and I'll say this, I guess maybe in my kind of quintessential way, but I know that I work in this place, but I like highly reject the idea that the apex of our religious life happens when we're 18 to 20. Like, I think that's like a farce. I think that it's wrong. I think that it messes with people's heads also, because it kind of makes us think like we're supposed to like, chadesh yemenu kekedem, which like, I'll tell you a secret, like I wouldn't want to go back to being 19. Like that was a hot mess. I don't want to go back there. Do you know what I'm saying? So like I'm saying, I'm so grateful to be now in the here and now. But of course the question becomes, how do we keep being, I would say, proud, happy, feeling at one with where we are in our moment in our Avodat Hashem. And I think that that's the bigger question. Obviously, I was thinking that it's interesting. We always have this question about how we view the Jewish months, right? Do we view them as the Torah version of starting from Nisan, or do we view them as Rosh Hashanah, as sort of the beginning of the year, even though it's the 7th month? And I think about that a lot because a lot of times when I think about the season of like the tshuva season and the introspection that we have, is that it's definitely not something that we really want to relegate to 1 month of the year. Meaning we do it 1 month intensely because it's a little bit like an anniversary. If we didn't have a day for it, like we could say all we want that, we'll love our spouses or remember our children's birthday. But there's a reason why we have a date for something. Otherwise, it gets really, really hard to be intentional about it. So I think we all need the intentionality of Elul and Yamim Noraim, but in theory, like everything that we've been thinking about as we've been thinking about this session are ideas that I think are takef all year round. I just think that it's an opportunity to reflect on them and to be more intense and intentional about them in this time. But it's really something that we need to be doing. We need to be doing all the time. I'll just say one other thing about the 18 to 20 period of life and all the other periods of life is that And a little bit to add nuance to that statement I said, I think that there's a more ideal time in our life to devote ourselves to Torah study, because it's really, really difficult to do that when life gets really, really busy, and when our commitments just become something that are well beyond something that we can control daily. And so I do think that there are years where, like, the lahat that's natural at a certain stage of life, and the ability to just be, yes, inward focused and self-focused, those are great ideal years to work on, I would say, Torah study. But our whole life is gain when it comes to Avodat Hashem. And I would say that we would want our whole life to constantly become richer. And just like, again, we can use the metaphor of who we are when we're 18. I could use the metaphor of, my marriage in its first 2 years and versus where it is now. And I would pray that everybody would always feel that they're happy where they are in this moment. So Avodat Hashem is something we're always doing. I do think that Torah study can constantly become richer, but there is a moment of life where it's just simply a little bit less complex sometimes to devote ourselves to that. But Avodat Hashem is ongoing, always.
A little less complex, and also a little bit more like enticing or exciting. One of the other ideas that I tapped into here from Rabbanit Esti is that he talks about how Elul, which we just started Elul, we had Rosh Chodesh on Sunday and Monday. He talks about how one of the things that we know in terms of Jewish history in Elul is that this was the time that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai to get the second set of luchot. And when we think about the second set of luchot and what makes them different than the first set of luchot, so the first set of luchot, Rabbanit Esti writes, were given with all the fanfare that we know represented, or as kids, when people talk about Har Sinai, we imagine like the lightning and the thunder and the excitement and the avirah.
That's Elokim.
Yeah, and like the real feel of like God's presence. And he says, of course, that is a big part of Avodat Hashem. We want those moments of inspiration, like the Iruah, like tonight, like you want those moments that you could draw from. But on the other hand, the luchot Hashniim, he says, they represent the other part of Avodat Hashem, which is lo harash v'lo hachitzoniyot, not the noise and not like the external, but ele hiponenut pnimi, the internal reflection and the chipus of the mashmeut shebetel chazurim, like really trying to find the content and the meaning and the significance. And he says that when Hashem says to Moshe, Psalacha, when he's talking about the luchot shniim, and he wants him to engrave the luchot, so he says, Moshe Rabbeinu yatzarich v'chsov et haluchot mislaim. He had to really engrave the luchot in stone. That's hard work. He says, Ulai lo hitnasitem b'avodah hazel. Maybe you don't have experience really, carving, engraving into stone. But he says it's not a simple thing. And Moshe, who was not a young man, had to work hard to do this. That is supposed to teach us that that's the derech lahasig Torah. Sometimes we have to be sporet hakir, lachsov sela. I was thinking about this, like, very much in the way that you said, like, there's so many things in life where it's like the beginning, you could fall in love, it's very flashy, but then when you're married, you realize, wow, there's so much more depth here. Like, I thought that I knew this person, but like now there's so much more depth. Or you could start a new job and there's so much excitement, new people, new work. But then when you're in it for a few years, you're like, wow, like what was I doing? I was so inexperienced. I thought I knew something. And the same thing that sometimes when we are in that period of limud Torah in a midrasha or in university or whatever, where it's like, on the one hand, very foundational and very core and very exciting and new and whatever, and not something that we want to be midalig on, but there is something of this idea of the luchot shniim being something that sometimes when you clear away the external chat things, you come back to like the content gets more room. I guess, you could focus more, if in a year in Migdal Oz, it's like a little bit about the Torah, but a lot also about the experience and like the friends and the drama and the staying up till 3 a.m, then sometimes you come back to even some of the same Torah that you learned and you're like, oh, I kind of missed the content the first time around. I was involved more in the chavaya, which is very important, but the content is also
you're making me think also, Rabbi Sachs, I don't remember where he writes it, maybe it's in his Parsha essays, but he basically writes that every time something happens in in the Torah that is entirely by God, it gets ruined and someone else has to remake it with human hands. Meaning the creation of the world, we have it written twice, where we have the very Hashem-centered creation, and then the second chapter, which almost immediately starts with Ha'adam. And you have the Luchot, and you have the Mishkan, and that like this idea that Hashem doesn't really want things that are just like perfected. He wants something that's made imperfectly by human hands. So that made me think about that. I thought of an idea. Okay, an idea about how to think about a little bit like a system, maybe, even in terms of how we think about our Avodat Hashem. I think that, and this is something, I when I started thinking about it more, Shayna, I was thinking about how, like, it's true about any system, even in my home, or like, I was thinking about even like my kitchen functions like this, but in everything we do in life, we need kind of a combination of like the systems that are set in place that are just like going to keep on going. They're not the things we're going to constantly ask questions about. We're not going to constantly be rethinking them. But alongside that, we also need like spontaneous efforts. I find that like summertime is a classic example because like on one hand, you kind of want like a daily routine. On the other hand, you're going to do like special things even more than during the year. Like you go on this vacation or that.
Flexible.
And you want to be flexible, right? But like in our regular life, whether it's in how my husband talked about this when he talks about like cooking for Shabbat, meaning he always likes to try things new all the time. And I'm like, you're overwhelming me. Like, can we just have like maybe like 80% set what happens at the staples? Like he doesn't like the whole staple concept. Okay, fine. But meaning like we need like the system that's set in place and then like the spontaneous efforts. And I think that this is really, really true also in Avodat Hashem. Because I know that it's really in vogue to constantly ask questions and like uproot our foundational beliefs. It's very overwhelming to do that all the time. And I think that whether it's like belief systems in place or it's like our behaviors or the mitzvot that we're like very makpid on or are part of our daily life. And, you know, we could put in tefillah here. I mean, there's a million examples of. But like we have the things that are the system and that like forms the backbone. And alongside that, we have really unique things like having hitvadut with, Delia Berlin, or we have, like events that we do that like add something different. But I'll say one thing, which is that the spontaneous efforts, it's funny, I'm so not into them anymore at my age that I can't even think about why they're attractive. But meaning the spontaneous efforts are, in theory, very promising for something that's special. And sometimes it delivers, right? Sometimes we went to that event.
Sometimes it disappoints.
And sometimes it disappoints, right? But the systems set in place are what hold us up, especially if the spontaneous efforts don't really bring us somewhere. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I'm just thinking back to the line that you said, because I've conversations with people here, about like how we don't always have to be questioning those systems. Like it's okay sometimes to say like, I committed to something and I know why I did. And it's okay for that to be like a staple in my life. It doesn't mean that we're not thinking or contemplative people.
No.
Just because you want some stability, and you could still leave room for the newness and the spontaneity and the hitchut.
I think also there's like a human need, meaning as humans, we do need to function with a certain degree of inertia. Do you know what I'm saying? We're going back to Rav Amital in the beginning, right? Like, I don't want people being lavut all the time. Like, we need a certain level of like, these are the things we do.
There are some people like that and kick them on your nerves.
Which
kind? Like, people that are being lavut all the time.
Right.
And I'm like, why does it get on my nerves sometimes? And I think it's because I'm like, is it authentic? Like when it's like you feel like, is it possible to really be that excited and that whatever all the time? There probably are some people out there that are, but a lot of times you feel that it's coming from that need to like try to prove to yourself that you can be, as opposed to just be like, it's okay, like he says, to not.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be.
And to me, it's about like having that cushion of stability. And then we also try and mathgare ourselves. We try to do something that pushes us further, something that's different, but like it then can be founded on like that, that deeper place that's just there and that's present.
I wanted to give some very practical tips also that I've been thinking about that could help us draw from the Elul Tshuva period into like the rest of our lives when we're going through different stages. I was thinking about the line that like we repeat over and over, like utshuva, utzila, utzdaka, mavirin at roa hagzira. first of all, there's all the philosophical questions of like, can you really override a gzera that Hashem made? Like, what does it mean that Hashem made a decree? And how could I, as a human, change that? And there's all these drashot about maybe like, because the gzera was, relevant to Shena when she was X, Y, and Z, but now that she's done tshuva and she's a different person, or she davens differently, or she's done stuff, she's given tzedakah and she's seen the world, so it's like no longer relevant. It's about changing who we are, not necessarily that we could override a specific gzera, but we could kind of make that gzera no longer relevant. Okay, those are all the philosophical points. But I was thinking about the practical point of that. Maybe there's something, why tshuva, tzedakah? Like, why do they choose those three? And I was thinking because they really draw on three different areas. Like, if we want to take it out of the Elul space and think about all year, tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah being things that could help us connect our Avodat Hashem. So I think of tshuva as like self-reflection, like real deep cheshbon hanefesh, or what are my weaknesses? Where am I struggling? How am I not being good to people in relationships? Perhaps if we're really stuck and you're like, okay, I tried that and like, this is just who I am, being able to say, no, this doesn't have to be who I am. Like, maybe I need professional help. Maybe I could go to therapy and like work on something deeper if there's a barrier and like it's in my way, or, it's getting in the way of a relationship. But tshuva in my mind is like, is connecting on that deeper level to ourselves and also to the people around us. So it could be friends, or it could be a spouse. Who could I talk with about who's my, where's my chaverut shel Torah, as Rabbanit Esti likes to say? Who are the people that I could talk with, not just in Torah, like open up a sefer and have a charuta? Who could I talk with about my struggles in my spiritual world? Where could I draw inspiration? What books can I turn to? What podcasts can I listen to? Who's a charuta that I could learn? And that wasn't a plug. That I could learn new things with. Stefan never misses opportunity. But yeah. Okay, tefillah. To me, it's what you just said.
Take that as
Tefillah. Tefillah is the balance, in my mind, of what you just said, the structure and the spontaneity. Because on the one hand, there's nothing more structured than tefillah. Erev, boker, v'tzoharayim, like mariv and shachrit and mincha, whatever, and like, what's your routine? Which tefillot are you committed to? What do you say? And that, there's also the spontaneous burst of like, thank you, Hashem, or I need help, or this is really hard for me, or the Rosh Chodesh davening with Rav Dov that you're going to go to that's like, that's going to draw something that's not necessarily part of your routine. And when do you go to shul? And when do you stay home? And when you're part of a minyan or whatever? But I think the structure and the spontaneous efforts is something that we could channel through tefillah. And tzedakah in my mind is like, okay, and where do you see outside of yourself? Like, tshuva is about you, and tefillah is about you at the end of the day and your connection to Hashem. But tzedakah is like, there's a world out there. There's people that are in need. There's people that need to be noticed. There's a community that needs you to step up and take a part in or whatever. So I think if we find ourselves in the middle of Adar, in the middle of Sivan, in the middle of whatever month it is, struggling with something, we could say, like, wait, Teshuvah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, it's not only an Elul concept. It's something that we could draw on throughout the year. And similarly, I was thinking about a story that I was Zucha to hear Rav Amital give sichot, because when we were in the Kollel for 2 years, and I only had my oldest, and he was a little baby, I got to go to yeshiva every Friday night, and Rav Amital and Rav Lichtenstein switched off, so I got to hear a lot of sichot from Rav Amital. And Rav Amital has this sicha that he would love to give about where he would mention that he was once talking to someone who was chozer b'tshuva, and they were asking him, like, now that you've discovered Hashem, you discovered Torah, you discovered a world of religiosity, where do you start? Do you take on everything at once? Maybe that will be overwhelming, maybe it won't last or whatever. And he said that he advised him to think of it like the Jews at Marah. We know that before Matan Torah, the Jewish people on their way out of Mitzrayim got 3 mitzvot before they got the whole Torah. They got the mitzvot of Shabbat, the mitzvot of Parah Adumah, and the dinim, the regular system of laws, or some say specifically Kibud Avim. And he says, when you are trying to come close to Hashem, and I think this is true for anyone who wants to be chozer b'tshuva, not just someone who wasn't religious and now, but any of us who are feeling far and we want to come close. He's like, commit yourself to something like dinim, something that makes total sense to you. Like, even if there wasn't Torah, even if I wasn't a Jewish person, I would do this. This is valuable. This is meaningful. This is important. And he says, commit yourself to something that you don't understand at all, like para aduma. It makes no sense to me. Why would I have to do this? Who made this up? But that's what it means to be a committed Jew. And he says, unless the Shabbat is about finding a time in the week where you could recharge. That even if all week your head's not there and you're very busy and you don't have time to think about your Avodat Hashem, on Shabbat you could take that time to reconnect and recharge. And I think sometimes I've seen this in my own life, that sometimes like that half hour of learning that we might do on Shabbat or singing Smivot or whatever, it could be more valuable than like a 4-hour Seder Boker, in the sense of like, I set this time aside and it's helping me reconnect and recharge. And I think these like little things that we could remind ourselves during the year, whether it's Tshuva, Tfilah, Tzedakah, or whether it's, Dinim and Paradima and Shabbat, they're little like tips, little things that we can be like, oh yeah, what's my Dinim, what's my Paradima, or what's my Tzedakah, what's my Tshuva, things that can help us connect when we're feeling a little bit more far.
Just wanted to add on to more to the tzedakah piece, because I think communal involvement, which is really important, because for so many of us it brings like a tremendous amount of meaning. That looks really different at different stages of life, right? Meaning sometimes we're part of a kehillah where we can be on different va'adim, or we can have that kind of contribution. And sometimes we don't have that capability. So it depends also like where we are, what kind of kehillah we're a part of. I will say that most kehillot are always looking for people to really like help and be part of them. There's always a lack of people that are able to do things, and like
for sure women.
Yeah, and women, larim et hakfafa, and like there's a lot there that needs to be done. And I guess also one thing that I would say just about the tzedakah piece is that I'm a really big believer, and sometimes it takes a stage of life to figure out what that is, but like at different stages of life, like I like to choose what is my tzedakah and what is not my tzedakah, because there's so much need out there. I'll just give a very practical example. Yes, it's from my life at the moment, but like I know that like there's a very common thing in Israel is like meal trains. I know it's common everywhere, but meaning whether it's a postpartum or somebody had a surgery or people move into the neighborhood, and I know that for me, it's like a disastrous chesed. Like it's a mistake. It means that night that I'm an evil person. I am stressed about getting dinner for them and for my own children. And like I did it enough times to know that like it's not my chesed right now. Like it's just not good for me. Just by way of
mine either.
It's not your neither. It's like my husband loves to sign up for him. Like he needs to be on the women's WhatsApp. He can sign up and you can make the food, but like I won't do it. Like it's not a good chesed for me. And then I get into moral dilemmas. Am I going to give them healthy ingredients? And then it's really expensive chesed. And then like I get like no good. It's not my chesed. But like I'm just saying, for me right now, like my chesed is if I'm ever asked to give a shiur in my community, I always say yes. Like because that's the thing I can do, that I'll do it, and afterwards I won't be angry. And I won't be angry, meaning who I was, meaning not angry at anybody else. I always can say no, but meaning a recognition that like I want to do chesed, I want to help people, but some cheseds they just don't work. And so I think that, we all have different moments like that, and it could be, again, I want to be careful not to give too many like very exact examples, but at different stages of life, there just are things that work better for us and work less. And it's really okay to be like, that's a wonderful chesed. I'm not the right shaliach for it right now, because I always say like, if it's a chesed that makes somebody else close to me suffer, not a good idea. Okay. So I think that that's something that I also think about in terms of like the stage of life we're in, what's good for us at that moment, what's available to us. And I think that I just want to say one thing that I was really thinking about also before, that I just want to like also give a tiny plug for Torah learning for a moment, which like, because while Avodat Hashem is for a whole life, and I do think that there are times in life where like intense Torah learning is something that's more natural. I think that when we think about ourselves honestly, we are all constantly, I'm going to use the ichi term, but like imbibing content all the time. But we're imbibing content in the broader world. And I think that it's just a call. I think that all of us, and it doesn't have to be from a sefer, although that's lovely. There was other research that came out this week that said only 16% of Americans actually read from a book every day. Just saying. But maybe not a horrible thing. I'm not sure. But But I think that it is important that we try and be engaged in some kind of learning. Again, learning can be in all those different mediums we mentioned, but like we're just constantly, there's so much that's washing over us on a regular basis that I think that there is a really important piece.
It's a counterbalance.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, things evolve over time in terms of like different stages of life and kids. And sometimes, as we're talking about, the learning happens through the engagement with kids.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, we'll save that for another time as they're asking us to wrap up.
I want to just go back to one point of the Rav Amital, which is that one of the things that I was reminded of in reading this book is that Rav Amital, he often gave the same sichot over and over. Like he literally would tell the same stories, not just every year in the same parsha, but sometimes on a few different parshiot. And as opposed to people finding that boring, he was loved for that. Like it was like, the baby crying. You guys know that story, like a famous one. Or he has the story about hapara, that like a chassid came to his Rav, and he was like, my cow, and all the chassidim were like, what does he want from the Rebbe with his cow? And the Rebbe understood, he wants my attention. He wants to connect. He wants to, where Rav Amitai used to speak a lot about being normalim, or he would talk a lot about the value of mechuyavut, even when you're not feeling good, and how you don't always have to look to be mechubar.
Well, I say, as an addition to that, Rav Lichtenstein, that many would write that no matter what Chag it was, the message was learn Torah. It's Hanukkah, learn Torah. It's Shavuot, learn Torah. It was always learn Torah. But again, we can laugh at it, but that they know exactly what he stood for. Meaning this idea about like having our values be clear. Sometimes that means we repeat ourselves, but meaning that they both had different messages. I think that they were
that they came back to and they balanced each other out also. And I wanted to end by saying that I think a very special part of Rabbanit Esti that is then reflected through this Beit Midrash is her mix of like of the mechuyavut aspect of like, the Tamid Shachar v'Shavin Arvayim, and like you do it every day and you do it like clockwork, and
we do 50 gram.
Exactly. And at the same time of the fact that he does really want us to feel connected, and that balance of like the limud with the ruchaniyut, or of the mesorah with the ability to be mechadish and to feel that newness, or calling your grandmother even when you're not in the mood every Friday, or all the things that she repeats over and over, throughout the year and every year. And I think, we're lucky in that to have Dmiyot that we could come back to draw, or a Beit Midrash that we could draw chizuk from. And we know that we're in the month of Elul, we're saying the parak of the Avodat Hashem and Shacharit, and in our vid, and the Avodat Hashem entered the pasuk Kaveh al Hashem, Chazaf v'Metzibecha v'Kaveh al Hashem. And it was making me think about the fact that sometimes like Kaveh al Hashem, like we turn to Hashem very naturally. We have hope in Him. We don't have to work for it. We just feel connected. It's that moment. It's that sunset. It's that feeling in us. It's whatever it is that like, Barur, Kaveh al Hashem. But there's other times in life that bemet chazak v'netridecha. We have to strengthen ourselves, and we have to even find the courage to strengthen ourselves, to work hard, the Kaveh al Hashem, to hope in Hashem, and to reconnect. And hopefully we could take this Elul to be l'chadesh aminu kikadem, as you started with, and to draw from an event like this and from Elul in general throughout the year and throughout different stages of our life. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Hamas. Did this conversation move you or cause you to think about the topic in a new way? Please share these episodes with friends and family and start conversations about meaningful mitzvah observance with all of them. You can contact us with thoughts and questions at womentalkingmitzvot@gmail.com. That's womentalkingmitzvot@gmail.com. Looking forward to our next conversation.